What's up, everybody? We are back here for another episode. We have our special guest, Andy Mendez, back for episode number 2 for him. He is the CEO and founder of Vamp Media, which I believe you didn't launch before. So something new to talk about, super exciting. Always love getting Andy in here just to talk to me, let alone coming in to share his thoughts, his opinions on what's going on in the world, especially from the entrepreneurship side and marketing. He is an absolute marketing master. So thanks so much, Andy, for hopping on.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. A lot's happened since the last time. It's been a few years, but super excited to be on again.
Cool, man. I think, it's been 2 years.
Yeah,
so
it's crazy.
A lot's happened for both of us, right? So excited to have you back. First, quickly, because I think you were episode like 13 of season 1. So, 50 episodes later, probably should give a little revamp. So if you can give us a quick recap of who you are, kind of your background, and then we'll jump into everything else.
Cool. Perfect. Andy Mendez. Last time that I was on the podcast, I was working for Visit Modesto as the director of marketing. And since April of this year, I went full time into being self-employed and focused on my business, Vamp Media Group, where we provide digital marketing solutions for local businesses. And that's really kind of been a crash course into full-time entrepreneurship, and I think really getting my hands dirty in the industry has been fun. And like I said, a massive learning curve because it's just different than working full-time within an organization, right? You have more things to worry about. You can't just focus specifically just on marketing. There's other aspects of the business. That's been a lot of fun. And then on things outside of that, really kind of just been focused on really connecting with the local community, trying to meet with friends, colleagues, etc., and just trying to enjoy the ride.
Awesome, man. And I know there's a lot that we left out there because you kind of started more since the last podcast, but obviously you have an extensive background working for different companies and working in this space. So that was a very humble recognition of what your background is. But, I would love to jump in, if you're okay, jumping right into going from being an employee to, jumping out on your own. I think there's a lot of people that listen to this podcast that are in that, like, I want to go in, but it's a scary leap, right? The older we get, the scarier it gets, right? Because we have life responsibilities, and I think we also get a little bit smarter with the risk that we're willing to take. And so making that leap and jumping in, how has that been? I know you've been mentioning networking and connecting with different people, but just share a little bit about how that's been for you, making that leap.
Yeah, I think it's crazy actually, because that's been on my mind a lot lately. And I think there was obviously a lot that kind of led up to that decision, that final leap. I've been in those shoes where I've been like, I kind of want to jump into it full time, but I'm not sure. And then really, I think the biggest shift that happened for me to really go into it full time is some personal things happening that really categorized the fear. I think it got put into perspective that fear, at least from my perspective, that fear isn't necessarily real. Mm-hmm. It's like arbitrary. And I think that was like the big shift to really jump into it full time. And I think that's kind of really the big indicator. And I think really also, I know I'd reached out a little while ago when I was kind of like, really trying to get this thing off the ground. I still am. But having that, I would have that fear set in and I would try to go have my foot in to kind of being employed and then foot into being like contracted out, like, because that's the only thing I knew is to like, I need money, so I need to get a job or a part-time job, right? And I think like a day after that, I had texted you that I just made a conscious decision that, okay, I had made the leap, and it's either I'm willing to go to zero or, this thing really takes off. And I found that as soon as I made that switch, like, no more looking for like jobs, like I'm willing to go to zero on this. It actually started going the other way. Like, because I started like taking it more seriously. I started like, the only thing in my mind was if I needed cash flow is to get another client. And I think that shift in mindset was a huge like unlock, again, as I'm still trying to get momentum. But again, it was just like, I feel like I was on the fence still, even though I made the decision to go self-employed. I was still like, well, just in case, I'll keep applying just so I have a net. But as soon as I made the decision, like, no, this is like what I am, this is what I do, and then I'm willing to go to zero on it. It was like, it just became way more like hyper-focused. And I found that I didn't even know I felt that was something that was holding me back in the past, was still kind of being half-baked on both, you know?
And I think that's something that a lot of people have that first year or so, they're like, well, but I could always get a job. Like there's always that I could get a job. And I think you have to kind of burn that bridge and be like, no, like I'm, like you said, I'm willing to go to zero. And when you can kind of like embrace the potential risk, it's just like, all right, cool. Like I'm willing to do that. But like, if that's worst case, then I got to put the work in for best case, instead of always like, well, I could always fall back. It's just like, I don't believe that we shouldn't have plan A's, B's, C's. Like I think it's relative, but I think it's like in entrepreneurship, it has to be like all those A, B, C, D plans are all about the business. Like it's like, okay, if that doesn't work, I'm gonna go this on this, and like, but it has to be all plans within the business. It can't be like, well, A is the business, B is getting a job, because then you're like you said, you're half in, half out, and never fully committed.
Yeah, and then as soon as there's any like struggle or adversity that you need to kind of overcome through the business, your go-to is the safe net, like what you're familiar to. And like you said, it's just like having those plans. And I think it's also right, like knowing how you are as a person and like what you need to excel within that. Like I have heard of a lot of people doing their business on the side and they wait for it to get momentum and then they jump fully into it. And again, I just thought again, based off my own prior experience, parent experience, whatever it is, like just background, I always thought that, oh, this is what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to work full time. And then once the business takes off, then go into it. And I found that as soon as like for my personality, just making the conscious decision that, hey, this is like, because for whatever reason, like I really identify with whatever I do career-wise. It's also a balancing act because I can't let it overtake my identity, but nonetheless, I just identify with my career. And as soon as I made the decision that, hey, I'm a business owner, like again, it was just my mind just got focused. Like this is what I do. But again, instead of like having like, okay, like plan B is just to go get a job, just making the conscious decision that, hey, I'm a lot happier. Yeah, like cash flow is a little bit. It's more of a up and down kind of struggle as opposed to a consistent W-2 income. But again, what I found too, and I think that's part of the reason why I said like I want to go to zero on it, is because I'm having a lot more fun. Doesn't mean that it's all like up. It's definitely like some weeks, like I said, my fiance, my family, my friends, they see me. Like some weeks I like feel on top of the world. Other weeks I'm like, oh my gosh, everything's crashing. Yeah. But like I said, I enjoy that. Like for whatever reason, like I think when I was really trying to go and work full time for a company, I was really struggling with how stagnant it was. Like, you can climb the ladder or whatever. And even those were uncomfortable conversations, constantly asking a boss for a raise and things like that. But for whatever reason, I really enjoy the ups, the downs, the trying to figure things out, like all that. Like I really enjoy it. It makes the day-to-day a little bit more fun as opposed to just knowing what to expect day in and day out.
I think you have to embrace that chaos. Yeah. Because and that is a challenging one for especially those people that are transitioning from stable consistency where your frustrations are, I need a raise, my coworker is this. Like it really is very individualistic, like problems. And then you go into this other thing and you're dealing with a client problem, you're dealing with your own personal problems, your life problems. Like there's so many different things going on, and like if you embrace that and just learn to love it, I think that's really where you can start to build that momentum. Not saying that you got to love it, right? You don't want to like love the chaos too much because otherwise the chaos will stay. But it's like I had a call with one of our clients not too long ago, and he was it's a part of our coaching program that we have, and he was just like, man, like I can't wait till I don't have to deal with problems anymore. I was like, no. Problems will never, like as long as you're in this type of career, they will never ever disappear. They just look different, and more importantly, you learn to how to deal with them. And like the problem that you deal with now, you'll look back in a year and kind of laugh and be like, I can't believe that stressed me out. Like I know how to deal with that now, and it's just that's the beauty, and that's what I had to kind of tell him is like, it's not that problems ever go away. It's just you learn how to deal with problems so much differently, and you can actually compartmentalize what is an actual problem and what is just like an emotional roller coaster or whatnot, or the ups and the downs in the business. They don't necessarily mean they're problems. It's just life. You know what I mean? It's part of the game. And so I love that you say that, because I think that if we don't embrace the roller coaster, that will take you out. Because if you're just looking for freedom, right? I think that's a lot of people is like, oh, I want to be my own entrepreneur because I want the freedom. I don't even think it's always the money. The money is obviously a part of it, but I think really people like the concept of not having to work for anybody and like that freedom of creating your schedule. But the reality is that freedom really comes with like embracing all the craziness. Like, and the freedom is like, hey, it's Friday, I'm gonna leave at 3 today. It's not that I get like the whole freaking week off. I'm just gonna leave a little early today, or I'm gonna work from home today. That's more of the freedoms. The chaos really, especially in the beginning, is what you have to deal with, not all the beauty, right? Entrepreneurship is not all the fun stuff in the beginning. It's the more challenges. So with all that being said, so this season I really wanted to bring like actionable steps for people. And we're gonna get back into more different topics, but I'd love to hear just from your perspective, what were some things that in those first few months, what are some lessons that you learned outside of just the chaos, but like, what were some things that you had to learn, some of the biggest lessons that you learned in those first few months?
Yeah, I think first and foremost is making, again, that mental shift in my mind. If I could have done that earlier, I think that would have played a big part of maybe getting some momentum a little bit earlier. Making that shift that, hey, this is what I'm doing full time, and I'm not going to still apply to jobs or anything like that. I'm a business owner now. That would be the first one, is making that mental shift. And then two, I think it's also, like I said, even though I enjoy the variety of like ups and downs and things like that, I think it's also practicing mindfulness too. And I know these are all kind of like mental, but like for me, like the mindfulness as far as compartmentalizing the ups and downs, because again, like when I'm like focused, I'm really into that thing, and like the everything else, it's not necessarily a good thing, but everything else seems to like dissipate for a little bit. And so I'm really like in it. And I think one thing that like I started doing recently is making more conscious effort to kind of step back and compartmentalize that fear, like what I referenced to earlier, and remembering the actual, for me, like I said, and I took this a little bit from Gary Vee, is imagining like basically not having the opportunity to do this physically and being, passing away or having a family member pass away. As soon as I make that shift, it kind of reminds me like, hey, this is all just one little aspect, right? So those are like two like mindset things. And then as far as like actionable items, I think the number one thing that I learned in the beginning would be being comfortable with investing cash flow to market yourself. I think in the beginning, again, switching from that mindset, I had kind of saved up. That's kind of the cash that I had, that I wanted to give myself some leg room. And I'm not saying like to burn through it all, but definitely be comfortable with allocating dollars to pump into the business early on, because what I started learning, although I'd heard it multiple times, is like oxygen feeds your business, right? And sometimes you have to be willing to feed your business before you feed yourself, And that's been something that's really been on my mind as of recently. But again, if I would have done it in the beginning, I think I could have maybe set up a little bit of a stronger foundation from the get, as opposed to like learning that now, and kind of being like, okay, like I know I have this cash, and I'm willing to risk this amount to, again, feed my business, and then I can worry about, quote unquote, feeding myself, next month or the month after that, and just trying to make sure that I manage those dollars better.
Yeah. I think it's weird, even though, like we both run marketing agencies, it is still like a fear of like, oh, how much am I going to spend? How much time am I going to invest? And it's like, you need to invest in marketing. And we obviously convince our clients the same thing, like you got to invest more. Yeah. And it still is a scary thing to like, okay, I got to spend this much on a videographer, this much on paid ads, or this much on whatever it is, right? But if you don't lay the foundation early, it's so hard afterwards. Yeah. Because once your business actually gets going, if it gets going without much marketing, it's like now you have 3 or 4 employees or more, and like trying to manage the clients, and trying to create content, like it gets freaking challenging, know? Exactly. And so I think if you can start small and just start building up those action steps, I think that's really what will help build the momentum. But like the investment into marketing is everything. If nobody knows you, how are they going to buy from you? Yeah. And I think there's something you mentioned earlier, which is knowing yourself, like knowing your strengths. And I think that's important too, because going into marketing, because sometimes people are like, oh, I'm just going to network. But it's like, if you're not a strong communicator, if you don't like going out and doing that, then like you need to invest in marketing. There's just different things that I think people are like, oh, I'm going to do this because I heard it on a podcast, or I heard this. But it's like, if you don't understand your strengths and your weaknesses, like that's a problem. Like, if you don't like sales, then you should probably like make sure you have really good marketing, because like Gary Vee says, the only reason you have to market is because you're bad at, or the only reason you have to sell is because you're bad at marketing. Yeah. And so it's like, okay, you need to invest more in marketing. And if you don't understand these little nuances of yourself, then you don't invest in the right things.
Yeah, and I think even like to your point, as far as like the focusing on networking, right? Yeah. even then, when you meet that person, and maybe it's somebody you never met before, whatever, and you give them your business card or information, having a strong website, having a strong social presence, having your brand just aligned at a high level is really what you want to like consider your brand. That just makes that supplements your sales, right? If you're already a good networker and you're good at having those conversations, then having that strong foundation is gonna basically just put on steroids, because now you're not having to sell as much, right? You're not having to say like, well, I've done this, this, and this, but then they go to your website and maybe there's no website, or your social platform still like kind of in the works, then they're still kind of questioning, because again, especially if you're in marketing, they're saying, well, I'm contracting you out to market, and then your stuff isn't, up to par, right? So I think it just like supplements your sales ability more than anything.
And I couldn't agree more on that. I really think that, as much as websites play their role in the marketing, I think the new version of your website is your social media.
Yeah.
Because when somebody, when I connect with people, there's business cards exchanged, but they'll be like, what's your Instagram? And then they go to your Instagram and they see your content, and you put out great content, and it's like, oh, okay, like, this guy's actually not only doing it, but then if I listen to it, he really knows what he's talking about too. So it's just it's like an immediate proof of concept that, okay, all right, especially from a marketing standpoint. Like I think it's funny, and I'm not here to bash any companies, but it's like you go on their profile and it's like 6 posts, all static, haven't posted in 9 months. And they're like, we're the best social media agency. And you're like, but you don't even manage your social media. I think there has to be a certain amount of that. And I think, maybe 2-3 years ago, you could get away with that, and you still can get away with it to a certain extent, but it just really does show your work, your proof of concept. And this could be said outside of just marketing. It could be real estate. It could be whatever it is. You have to have that brand there. It's no longer something that you can get away with not doing. You have to do it.
And it's like, and to anybody that is maybe listening, that maybe they're more like operators, right? What I'm starting to find out too is like, maybe you partner with somebody that can be that face. I think that's what, like with my account, I switched it to have it be like my personal brand, and then like the business is more so like the website entity to like funnel it in. But I think like, if I were in the position where I'm like, I want to focus more on operations, I would definitely look at partnering with somebody that is comfortable with like being the face, putting out the content, and then when you're having those meetings, they're in on that, and you explain the strategy. Because I think businesses are looking for that strategic like mental process as like that's your value add. That's why you're like smart at what you do. But again, like, but no matter what, it's just having that content out there so they can see like, oh, okay, maybe he's not doing it, but his partner is, and this is what they're selling.
Yeah, and that's a great point. It goes back to knowing your strengths and your weaknesses. I think there's a lot of people that are so terrified to put themselves in front of camera, and that's fine if you're just, I think I'll always push people to still do it. But like, if that's like you, like the operator, awesome, go all in on operating, but you still kind of need that face of the brand. And I've seen it with different companies where it's not the CEO because they're really busy, but they have like, one of their leaders is really comfortable in front of the camera, is excited about it. And I think that, in the past, a lot of companies have put marketing on their low value employees. Like, oh, I got this one employee, he doesn't really sell, but we're going to have him run our social media. And it's like, but like, is he excited about it? Does he understand? Like, is he the type of person, or is she the type of person that can really do it? And I think that we have kind of put it as like a low value task. Like, oh, I've got somebody kind of doing it. Like, you got to have somebody that's really doing it, because it is an investment that has to be made, and we have clients all the time that they start putting out content, and they're like, dude, I just got all these clients that followed me, but didn't really know what I did. And because they started putting it out, I also popped up as top of mind. And then when they got injured, or when they were looking to buy a house, or whatever the particular client's industry is, they were the first ones to be thought of. And and then I had a call with a client of ours that she's newer into social media, and she was like, I was blown away from just putting this out. It wasn't necessarily that I got a ton of new people that didn't know me. It was all the people that had been following me under my personal account that all of a sudden I started putting out this content, and they're like, I need a refi, I need to get a mortgage, or my buddy needs a mortgage, or and all of a sudden all this business started stimulating from just putting out content on their personal page. But we like to think that, oh, everybody knows I do this already. I put out a decent amount of content, and there's still people that are like, bro, you're in an agency? I'm like, yeah, man. Like, I had no idea, And so no matter how much content you put out, there's still people that follow you, know you, like you, that still have no idea what you're doing. So you got to remain top of mind and keep putting it out, and keep that message consistent. It's not one post. It's not 1 week's worth of posts. It's not 1 month's worth of posts that you're going to really do it. It's that continuous. So.
Yeah, 100%. I think you said something earlier that really resonated with me based off of just conversations over the last 5 years is businesses looking at social media as a low value item.
Yeah.
I think that's probably one of the biggest mistakes businesses can make, especially in today's day and age.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think it's a high value item for any business, and I think it's an archaic perspective to think that it's low value, because it's just like it used to be like, oh, okay, we're doing social media, we're trying it, right? Now it's like it's expected, because all the brands that are having success, like they have some sort of social media strategy. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're on every platform, but they have a strategy for one, and they're building that community again to stay top of mind, because that's where we're consuming content. That's where we're thinking of people. And kind of to your point, like with my stuff, even if, although I would love my output to be higher on like Instagram specifically, that's where I'm getting all the direct messages. And it's like people asking like, and I've put effort into my website, but again, no traction is necessarily coming from the website. It's just more of like a back end for portfolio. But again, everything is just through social platform. I post something, and then for whatever reason, it resonates with this one person one day. And then they ask, hey, do you do SEO, or do you do, social media management, whatever it is? And it's all stemming from that content. I think once business owners see that, they're like, okay, we should have been treated as a high value item. What happens after that person's DMs? Then you can start thinking strategically, right? What's my process once this person messaged? How do I make sure that they filter through? This is a client that I actually want to work with, and then we get them in the door, or we refer them if it's not something that we offer.
Yeah. No, completely agree. And, I think what you just said, community, is something that I don't think a lot of people think about. They're like, I have customers. But on social media, if you build a true community, I look at different food brands particularly, and it's like that is their customer. But then that customer takes pride in taking that photo, making that photo look nice, and then sharing it. And obviously, we see the food influencer community has grown so much. But it's like when you can build a real community, now your customers, they become your army.
Yeah.
And we've talked to different companies about this, like even solar companies in particular that have large sales teams. I'm like, look, if you've got 50, 100 guys and gals selling solar for you, and we get them creating content for you, now you get 50 posts a week. Even if it was just one post or one story, now you're getting those 50 shares. If each of them have even 100 people, like that's a ton of people that are now engaging and seeing your brand, seeing your content, learning about you, whether they're buying from you. It's the name recognition, it's the brand development. And I think that people massively undervalue the importance of building a community. They're just like, I want followers. But it's like, are you truly building a community? Are you creating content that resonates with them, that gets them excited? And on the food side, it's so colorful, it's so fun. And I love Mango Crazy is a one that I really enjoy. And it's always so colorful and like fruity and then they're getting all these shares. And it's like, if you're getting 100 shares per post, that's 100 people that are sharing your content for absolutely for free.
Yeah.
And it's crazy. And I think the one that I saw at the highest level was Alex Hormozi, when he talked about he and his wife spend $70,000 a month to create all the content for him. Now, that number seems very intimidating to a lot of people, and they're like, I'm not spending $70K. Yeah. But he says the same amount of impressions and reach that he gets would cost him over $2 million through running paid ads. Yeah. So he's like, the 70 to get $2 million worth of the same amount of reach, like it's stupid, right? Yeah. And you could look at it as like, okay, you invest 700 to get maybe $2,000 in reach. Like either way, if you invest heavy into organic, you can get the same amount of reach that you're getting on paid. And on top of it, you own it. So when you shut those Facebook ads off, that reach is done. But if you keep posting, it will continue to grow and it'll continue to compound. Yeah. So there's such an importance of creating organic content and then creating content that's actually designed for your community, so then that they share it and the community continues to grow.
Yeah, and you see the fruits of his labor for Alex Hormozi. Like he started popping up, he's like all over people's feeds and things like that, and his content is like it's blowing up. So that $70,000 investment is paying out massive dividends, and I think that plays to like a massive again like point is something that's been on top of mind too. Is just like how valuable I think content is, and just that. I think just how valuable it is. It's a valuable investment just because of the sheer volume that you need to pump, not only for organic, but even if you do want to jump into like paid ads, right? You need content. Like the amount of content you need is just ridiculous. And then now if you just add maybe strategy, you want somebody that comes in and knows the strategy on how to deploy that creative against like your target audience and build your community, then that's like the next value add. But again, the 70,000 again for doing it right, doing it with intention and with like a direct goal, then and the results are there, like it just makes sense,
Absolutely. And I think what you said on the paid ad side is very important, because sometimes people look at it as like, we'll just create one little graphic, we'll post it. And I see it a lot in the real estate space. It's like a digital business card. And they just literally frame it in a 1080 by 1080 version of their business card. And they're like, I'm your realtor. And then they just run it, and they're spending $1,000 a month, $500 a month, just burning cash on this crappy creative. And it's like, you've always got to revitalize your creatives. I mean, every week we literally shoot content for new ads, and we just kind of have to keep it going. And that's where you also test. You find what works, what doesn't, cut out what doesn't, accelerate what does. But you always have to be creating content. And there's this guy, Neil, his Instagram's Neil Home Loans, or Neil Loans, or something, Neil Home, something like that. And he threw an event that I attended a few months ago with Gary Vee in Vegas. And he says that, he's like, I'm not a mortgage lender that creates content. I'm a content creator that sells mortgages. And I love that he put the content, because he's like, I think we put too much on the content on the backside, like devaluing marketing, like, oh, I've got this young kid who doesn't really sell, like he's gonna run my social. Like, that's not the guy you want. And I love that he prioritized content first. And he's like, because of the content I create, my mortgage business has exploded. But if I had prioritized my mortgage business and put content on the back burner, my mortgage business would be nowhere near what it is now. And so I think we all kind of need to look at that. And I've kind of shifted how I look at it. I'm a content creator that runs a marketing agency instead of marketing agency owner that creates content, because I've always tried to then tailor my content to make me seem like I'm an agency owner. And it's like that, nobody gives a fuck about that. Like, people want to know the value you're giving. They don't care what your title is, what your position is. They want to know the value. And so shifting into, I'm a content creator, that has helped me shift my mind into how do I bring value? And even like we were talking before the podcast, that I had kind of just used the podcast as a content machine and not as like, I'm actually trying to build a community here. And that's why, I stopped season 3 and was like, all right, I'm gonna really like kind of revamp season 4 and come in with a more focus on building the community. And like, I am creating a podcast community. And then if I get out of it some cool clips, awesome. But this is not how I'm producing content. And the only reason I was doing the podcast was because I could sit down in front of the camera, ramble for 15 minutes, and get 6 clips out of it. And I didn't have to prep. I didn't have to think. I just would go. And to be honest, I was the marketing agency owner that created content. That was like how I approached it. But as soon as I shifted it into content, I was like, all right, value. How can I actually grow this? How can I grow that? How can I adjust? And my focus shifted massively into all the little details of content that before I was like, I'm just creating content. And it's just that shift. And all of a sudden the content has done better. We're getting more business from the content. And it's just these little tweaks of the mind. And I think when you said earlier, when I was like, we want to give some action steps. And you said the 2 mindsets, you're like, well, okay, more of an action step. And I think the reality is the best action steps are in the mind. And that's where the change happens first.
Yeah, no, 100%. Couldn't agree more. And I think you hit a lot of key points. I think a lot of key points that are relevant to business owners, and especially maybe business owners that they've got some traction and now they have maybe 100 employees or whatever it is, and they have this entrepreneurial skill, right? They know how to build business, and now what I've found is usually want to kind of figure out how to outsource or scale the content part, right? How do I make it take up as little time as possible on my end, which I think is valuable. But again, to your point, once you start switching to like, I'm a content creator and then the business second, in a weird way, that's going to generate more revenue for your business because you're taking it seriously. The reality is the majority of businesses are spending efforts on some sort of marketing. Why not spend the efforts on marketing that is actually going to generate the results that you're looking for, right? Because whether it's flyers, whether it's TV commercials, radio, like people still do all that stuff. Like people spend money buying swag, like all these different things that your company's spending time on. Why not treat the content in the same way, because the results are there, kind of thing. But again, all making that shift to, hey, the content creation is value.
Yeah. And that's it. And value looks different for every customer. Sometimes it's like the food porn stuff, like awesome, like that's the value for the customer, right? And I think that's the tough part, because people will see our content, which is very similar in the sense of it's educational value, right? And there's some motivation, inspiration, stuff like that too, but it's really kind of more the education. And then, they own a restaurant, and they're like, so am I supposed to sit here and talk about, how to run a restaurant, or like, what do I do? And I think that's where you have to go back to understanding your customer And I think that's the tough part is people want to just like pop a camera up and start recording instead of going like, okay, what value does my customer need? Yeah. And like I said, with this season, I had to start to think about, okay, what is the market like? Well, who's my customer? What is the market like that they're experiencing? And I realized with my audience being the mid 20s to mid 30s that are really the entrepreneur looking to become an entrepreneur or early in their entrepreneurial career, this time right now is a scary time, right? Because you're a little bit younger than I, and you didn't go through the '08 recession as far as like in the job field. I experienced it to a certain extent, and I thought back to then, I was scared crapless, man. Like I was so scared. I'd quit my job. I'd gone in and launched my own business, and I was like, what the hell am I doing? And I didn't really know what a down market was. Yeah. We didn't have Instagram at the time, so there wasn't all these people educating you on finance or economies. And so I got really scared. And so for me, I was like, okay, like I put myself back in that position. I was like, okay, why was I scared? Mindset, I had fear around it. And it was a lot of like the fear of the unknown. And so I was like, okay, I want to bring people onto the podcast that are doing well right now, that either have experience in the past markets or can bring value to what's happening right now and finding opportunities. And that's it really came to who is my audience and what do they need, and then serving them that instead of serving my own personal wants and like how do I make myself look really awesome. Like nobody cares about that. And there are a ton of people that post private jets and flashing cars and watches, and that will get you followers, but like those people aren't going to transact with you. Those people won't tell everybody about you and your content. You've got to bring the value, and you have to find that value for each customer.
Yeah, and I think to your point, this economy being like super crazy and bringing something that I think is value to entrepreneurs and people, like whether they're in the early stages or mid stages, whatever it may be. One common thing that I have heard through different like conversations with business owners that have been around for like 8-10 years, of the status that of the real estate group we were talking about earlier, like those kinds of businesses, the number one thing they keep saying is because the economy is shaking out right now, this is why I want to invest in marketing, because everybody that isn't going to invest in it, I'm going to set myself apart. And so I thought that was pretty interesting because, again, usually with meeting with smaller business owners, they're a little bit more skeptical, right? They want to preserve those dollars, rightfully so. I want to do the same thing. But I keep hearing the ones that, again, have been around a long time. They say, this is exactly when I want to invest in marketing, which is, again, whether the people watching take this advice. I know it's one thing that I'm internalizing too. Like, okay, I'm noticing that they're saying this. How can I do this for my own business? Because I noticed that they're doing the same thing. I didn't just do that for no reason and end up with a business for 10 years.
100%. So. Yeah, we're a part of a mastermind called the Rise Mastermind. It's all agency owners. And the gentleman that created it, Joel Kaplan, we were talking 2 weeks ago. And we were laughing because he's like, yeah, man, there's so many people pulling back on spend, like on paid ads in particular. And he's like, bro, I'm like, cool, you're pulling out, I'm pushing in. Yeah. Because if everybody's pulling out, that means I'm gonna get lower cost of leads. And like, we've seen it across the board. Our lead costs have dropped by like 40%. Yeah. And it's because everybody else is scared crapless. Yeah. And so we're like, let's keep pushing. Yeah. Let's, obviously within reason, we're not gonna just dump cash. But it's like, okay, if everybody else is scared, like you should probably push in.
Same as investing, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Buy when everybody's selling.
Yeah, and when everybody's buying, you should probably be reserving, right? And we obviously saw that too over the last year, and so it's very interesting when people play scared. And I think, I've been looking a lot at these two words, scared and fear, and like learning the two differences. And I think what I've really learned is that like fear is more of a long-term emotion, and as entrepreneurs or business owners, we can't be fearful. We can be scared. Like I can wake up and be like, fuck, I don't know how I'm making payroll this week or something. That's okay. But being fearful, that's where you become like paralyzed, like paralysis by analysis, and fear is this thing that becomes like an internalized emotion versus like scared is like a momentary emotion. And so I think that you have to watch when you start to become fearful of investing, fearful, and like understand, well, why am I fearful? And like, okay, is it that you just don't have the money? Okay, what can you do if not that, right? And there are a lot of people that'll be like, oh, I don't have money for paid ads. Okay, cool. Then like organic. And they're like, well, I don't have time for that. Then it's like, you got to evaluate where you're spending your money and what you're spending your time on, because if you can't do one of the two, then your business is never going to grow. Yeah. And then whatever your fear is, it's rooted at the level of you probably not having enough business to pay your bills. Yeah. So what is the solution? Yeah. You know, like it's either time or money, or time and money, you know? And we always talk with clients about that when they're like, oh, or, you know, prospects, I should say, I can't afford that and I don't have time to do this. It's like, you got to really evaluate what you're doing with your time. And I think that's another thing that we have to do in times like this, where the times are good and then they get bad. And you have to change what you were doing in the good times, because maybe in the good times, like we were saying about real estate, like, I mean, you could slip up and sell a home with little to no experience, right? It was a really good last 2 years, and now it's not. And so you have to change how you were going about acquiring business, and you can't get romantic with the past.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I think it's with like any industry, right? Whether it's real estate or any industry that was doing really well during kind of the past couple of years, or past 8-10 years. But yeah, it's again, it's adjusting with the market. It's also auditing, right? If you're a smaller business owner, how much I think what I found too sometimes is, and maybe this could be my own perspective, is sometimes just sacrificing maybe what you want for personal. Like I always look back and see like people's habits, including my own, that we're comfortable with spending money really at any level. It's just a matter of what that thing is. And so when I noticed that, I'm like, okay, like, obviously people are willing to buy anything, and including myself, right? Even if it's overpriced. But if you're a business owner, it's maybe sacrificing some of the personal wants, and then think about it like, okay, maybe, whatever psychology you need to use to like justify the ad spend on the business, I think it'll pay dividends. Like for me, like I was thinking like, okay, maybe I have to put this one thing off that I want, but I'll be able to enjoy it stress-free in like a year. Yeah. Okay, cool. That's worth it to me. Yeah. But then like if somebody's like, I want 2 of them, well, sure. Whatever works for you. But I think sometimes sacrificing those, again, to feed your business, because your business is a long-term investment, And
I think a lot of people want to pull out early, like because they're like, oh, I got reap some rewards. All right, cool. I'm going to go buy a car or do something like that. And I think it's always funny when somebody buys a new car, like, before they even had the money, they knew exactly where they were spending it. And it's like, but then you're back in the same spot, and like versus like, let's make that investment. Let's get to the next tier. And then when we're at that next tier, then I can go buy the car. Yeah. Or I can buy this or that, And I think we're so quick to want these material things in our lives, and there's nothing wrong with it. And I'm the first to admit that I do the same thing. But like through trial and error, I've learned that it's not always the best situation. And one of the best investments is in getting your business to the next tier. And at the same point, also like, not recklessly growing, right? Like manageably growing, especially in times like this. It's like, we had a client that was like, yeah, man, like we had such a good year in 2021. And then like 2022 hit, and I started hiring all these employees like way ahead of schedule. And he's a small business. Then he got an office, and then he's like, within 2 months, we had to close the office and fire a bunch of the employees. And it's like, sometimes we want to get to that, to like, not even the next level, but like 5 levels above. And I think that comes a lot from, like, I mean, you have some very successful friends. I have very successful friends, and we may be peers in like age and in like what we've done in life as far as like gone to college and different things like that. But like, they're just further ahead. And like sometimes we want to get up there so quickly instead of being like, okay, where's the real next level? And so we'll recklessly grow, or we'll throw money at little things. And it's like, you can't throw money at little things or at things to try to grow. Same thing with, your marketing. You can't just throw somebody at it. You have to be strategic. You have to have a plan, and you have to grow profitably. And, I can admit that my last business, Go Fresh, like we grew recklessly, but like hindsight tells me that in the moment, nobody could tell me anything. I was like, no, we're going to get it. We're going to get it at volume, at scale. We're going to be making crazy money. But like, I had never actually focused purely on profitability and sustainability. And if I had done that at an early level, kind of like we talked about marketing earlier, that like, then we got to 6 locations and it was like, oh fuck, like now how do we like cut the bloat, and like, how do we manage everything? How do we get sustainable? And so I think it's really important to understand what growth looks like, and what kind of growth do you really want? Because I think we want the success and we want the big business, but those don't happen in a line. Like they don't happen at the same time. It's not like, oh wow, look at the business is killing it, and I just bought a Ferrari. It's kind of like the business got to kill it first, and then you can start reaping some of the rewards. So it's definitely manageable, and I think that sometimes we want the nice lifestyle instead of making the investments into marketing.
Yeah, and I think even just you hit on something where you were saying that this person had got an office and hired a bunch of employees and things like that, and I think that's one thing that I'm also learning again from the early stages. That I think is also important, and I'm sure a lot of business owners and yourself, like you guys have experience with this, which is those decisions are what I'm finding out is like all those little decisions are what make a successful entrepreneur, right? Am I investing these dollars in do I need the office or do I need support staff? What kind of role do I need? Do I need somebody maybe part-time, entry level? Like what do I need? Or maybe do I need something, maybe I need a software for my process, like for my process with my clients. Like maybe I need to service them better to make sure that they're always they're gonna stay with me for like the long term, and then that investment during this time is I want to grow with my clients. But all those little decisions are I think what separate the business owners that go out of business or the ones that end up succeeding in the long term, and that's what I'm trying to in the early stages try to pay attention to those different decisions from people that have been doing it, because again, it's like all those little things where if I could focus just on marketing, like that would be awesome. That would be awesome. But then I'm like, okay, well, I'm getting some cash flow. Do I invest it here? Do I do it here? Do I just sit on it? Like what? But what do I do with it? But all those little decisions I found are like, man, those are all like crucial decisions, because again, if you get an office, you hire a bunch of employees, and you have to close shop in 2 months. Maybe the best decision was maybe no office and half the employees at first, and then you're like, okay, let's see what this looks like, and then from there we'll add staff or get the office, whatever it may be.
Yeah, I think the biggest lessons that I've learned over the last, probably specifically the last 3 years, obviously my whole career I've been learning it. I think I just became aware of it the last few years, which is really like, we as entrepreneurs or as individuals as well, like we only have so much energy and focus. And I used to think, I'm doing well here, let's go open another business, or let's offer a new service or open a new store, whatever it is. And then now when you start to do more of things, your focus doesn't divide evenly. It's not like 50-50. It's like really like 40-40, and you lose 20 because just the refocusing on the next project, like just going between those two things causes like a clouded amount of focus. Yeah. And so you actually dilute your focus the more things you do. And, we've done it here is we love doing paid, we love doing social. But we were doing some websites, we're doing landing pages, we're doing all these different things where it got us fuck, that's a lot. And then it's we're doing well at a few of them, but we're not really killing at any one of them. And as we've slimmed down and focused our services down into really prioritizing social and wanting to be the best social media agency, it's the team has gravitated towards that. Oh, okay, cool. This is what we do. Yeah. So I need to just hone my skills in here. So they're becoming better as we've narrowed down. I'm becoming better. And you start to really learn blueprints to be able to scale much quicker because you're not focused on 30 different things. Your job is to come in and build that one thing. Yeah. And I think the problem that most people have with that, and I can admit that was the same thing for me with my past companies, is that it was you hit the good times. It's easy to get to a certain level, yeah. But that next level requires strategic thinking, yeah. And that is a skill amongst itself. But if me, I grew up being more of a laborer, just being around my dad, owning a construction company, he didn't really do marketing, it was word of mouth, and then he went and banged the nails. Yeah. So I kind of grew up in this, if I'm not physically working, am I really working? Yeah. But to grow your business sometimes is actually sitting down for a whole day with a pen and paper and building out the plan. Building the can-do list in essence of what's working, what's not, and really building out a map. And I think that's one thing that we also undervalue as entrepreneurs is the ability of actually sitting down and focusing on the problem to solve it, yeah. Instead of just being throwing shit at it and eventually I'm gonna solve it. And it really doesn't. It takes that moment to sit down and go like you said, what do I actually need next? Yeah. And then building out the map. Maybe you don't need 3 employees, maybe you need 1. I think the sexiest thing is having an entrepreneur with a company doing multiple millions and having 5 employees. That is whoa. Yeah, but before, and I think we look at it from the ego side, right? I'm a big, my ego is a problem. And I don't mean ego, I'm the shit, yeah. But it's I'm okay and willing to admit it that something along the lines of my childhood made me give a fuck about what people think. Yeah. Probably too much, right? And so in my early entrepreneurial days, I thought more about what people look at me as. And I was I want a big business. And I think a lot of young entrepreneurs think, I need a lot of employees. Because if I get a lot of employees, I don't got to work as much, or I get to do the fun shit. Bro, managing a lot of employees is tough, right? And being a leader isn't always what it's cut out to. And I love the size of our team now because it's extremely manageable. Yeah. I can pour into them. I'm not dealing with as many personalities and all these different things. And so sometimes we do things not because it's the best of the business, but it's what people may think of us. Yeah. And we really care about that. We want people to think we're killing it. Yeah. And I think it's pretty funny when somebody's like, oh, you're killing it. I'm like, no, you just like my content. Like that's all you know about me. And like, I'll tell them that. I'll be like, oh, I appreciate it. Yeah, my content's pretty good. Like, no, you're killing it, bro. Like, hey man, like business got not quite worth. No, you're killing it. You're like, no. Like, and then like they're confused. Like, they're like, oh, you're killing because you're posting all the time. And it's like, no, man, like it's like, it's brick by brick. Like I'm just putting the work. I'm trying to grow it. And so I think a lot of people sometimes think that everybody else is killing. And so I need to give this perception of I'm killing it. And it's like, bro, the best way to kill it is to actually fucking kill it. It doesn't matter if anybody knows you're killing it. Yeah. It's about you actually killing it. And that's the most important part. It's not fake it till you make it. It's fucking making it.
And I think too, the number one thing, and I try to focus on this like with anything that I communicate out, and it's something that I find valuable is like, again, seeing the whole story, like from the beginning. Like I want to be able to look back and like have videos in my house to eventually like hopefully be in an office, but I think it's because I think a majority of people, like, because right, the 1% is only like 1% of the population, right? You still have the rest of the population, which is your day-to-day, like us, like your everyday people, and I think that having content that resonates with like your next door neighbor, the people that are in your community, I think people find that valuable and they find it relatable, and it makes it also, I think it puts it into perspective for them so that they think that they can believe in themselves for whatever it is they want to go to or try, if it is a business or if it's to apply to that job or if it's to even just create content around stuff that they like. But again, seeing people like, hey, this person's like trying it. And then again, like once they start killing it because they're actually killing it, I think people can sense it, people like, and I think we've gotten pretty numb to like the private jets and everything. Yeah. Like people can sense when like, again, you walk in here, like you're building a business, and it's like, I think having that transparency of like what it is you do as just I get more focused on the services and action as opposed to like the rewards of it, right? Yeah. And I think it's more relatable. Again, I think like for me anyways, I walk into an office, it's like, okay, this is like an actual business. And then two, if you're sharing like, taking your dogs on a walk, whatever it is, like, oh, like I have a dog, like, just like it's another person. It's like, it could be my next door neighbor. I think that's what people really gravitate towards. And you always find like people build the closest fake relationships with celebrities when they start showing that human side to them. It's like, I hear it all the time with people saying like, oh yeah, this celebrity posts this. And I feel like they're like my best friend, but we've never met. And then, but it's like, that's, I think, what gets you bought into their brand, because then they launch a tequila brand or whatever it is. And they're like all about it, if it's Kevin Hart and all those human sides of them, like really kind of being a human and less about like the flash. Yeah. And again, you could just tell that, when they're killing it, they are killing it. And again, in the early stages, they're transparent about it. And then you just build like fans for life, And I think at the end of the day, business and life is all a people game. And I think that's the number one thing, like reputation and how you treat others, like usually I know people always say it, but it usually ends up working out building those holistic relationships. And that can be done a little bit at scale with social media, just by what you communicate about yourself,
100%. And I think that it's like, going to networking events are great, but like you can really build some great friendships just through social media. There's a lot of people that I've like actually never physically met, but like I talk to them pretty often on like we're friends, but like never actually seen them, and it's all been through social media. And it's funny that the story you just shared about the celebrities. It's like when I met Gary a month and a half ago or whatever, I walk up to him and it's like literally like I'm seeing my boy, and he has literally no idea who I am, but it's because he's always put out authentic content. Yeah. And he brings it up in a lot of his keynotes where he says like the blueberry video where he talks about why he loves blueberries is his like most popular video of all time, like far outranks everything else, and it's just him talking about blueberries. And it's because it's so relatable, and I think I love Alex Hormozi's content because he's wearing like a freaking cutoff and like a nose strip, and you're like, this guy's not what I think of success.
Yeah.
But like the verbal content is so important. Like it doesn't matter about the suits and the jets and the cars and the watches and all that stuff. It's about the relatability and the value that you're bringing through your content. And I think, I think even myself, I've fallen off on posting a little bit more of my life, and I've gone into a lot of the micro clips, and it's something that I have felt a little bit of a disconnect. Thank goodness I post on my story a little bit more of the life, but there was a lot of people that were like, yeah, man, like you don't really post any life anymore. And I was like, I got a little too into it. And so there's always that, like, you can overcompensate and you got to just realign, but it's having that awareness to like, how are you showing up on social? Is it just about trying to impress people, or are you actually building relatability? Because the person that's just all about the flash, not as many people really relate with that, versus like, oh man, like, I posted about me being in a car accident, like I'm trying to get back on track with my fitness. And the amount of DMs that were like, people like, dude, like, yeah, man, I got COVID and it really threw me off and like haven't gotten back on. Like, what are you doing to get back on? And like just that of like sharing the struggles of getting into a car accident or having a life event happen where it took you out of working out or doing something, like how did you get back to it? Yeah. People relate with that more than me being like, look at this stack of cash, right? Something like that. They're like, cool, like,
yeah, exactly.
Nice, but,
that would be nice kind of thing,
Yeah.
But I think, I mean, that just falls in line with, right, we have our hats on for work and career, but I think oftentimes too, we forget about that human side, right? Like they said, you got into a car accident, like you don't know how many other people that maybe you have meetings with and they come across a certain way and you're like, okay, this is, they're getting irritated really fast, whatever it is, that they just come off differently. But again, you don't know if they had something happen in their personal life. And again, because we're all humans, I think having that human side on like on your brand also just makes it more relatable. And that can be in like so many different ways. I think I for sure definitely got burnt out of like sharing like personal life things. And that's just like a personal decision. Yeah. But, for me, I really like talking to like the camera. Like maybe I can like hit on those things talking to the camera, not necessarily showing them. But that's like, again, my personal decision. Yeah. And somebody might be like, okay, I like showing my house and things like that, like without flashing, but just because they're making a smoothie or whatever it is, right? But it's just finding that thing that resonates with you. But you can tell, again, you can always tell, I feel like when somebody's doing it, again, more of like that flash and especially if it's not real. I think I've had some, I think with social media being new as I was kind of growing up and things like that, you had kids in college like posting things and like obviously you could tell it was like a parent's car or something, yeah, and then saying like this and this or whatever. And if you really knew that person, you knew that they're just full of it, but you had like full on adults also doing that during that time. And I think you just lose you get more skepticism when you have the in-person conversations because, this person's willing to like bend the truth, Yeah. And that's where it's like, I think that's one thing that, at least if you're flashing and you have it, then it's like one thing. But if you're flashing and you don't have it, it's like, you're really making yourself, you're not putting yourself in a good spot just because I for sure definitely, I'm always skeptical now afterwards because I'm like, okay, if you bend the truth for this, like, what are you willing to bend the truth for,
Absolutely. I want somebody that follows me on social media to meet me in person and be like, you're exactly the same way as your profile. Like, there is not you're super friendly on there, but then you come around and you're like, whoa, that guy is not approachable. And, like, I hope I can always remain that way and I never lose that integrity because I think it is really important. I want to show up the same way in every aspect of life. And something you mentioned earlier that I want to kind of go back to, which was talking about your identity and not like kind of just becoming the entrepreneur. Yeah. And, there was this situation. I mean, I definitely, my identity became Billy Go Fresh, and like everything was around Go Fresh. And it was very challenging for me to get out of that. Right. And in every capacity. And, one of the big life reasons that I didn't choose to, and this is the first time I like kind of publicly talked about it on the podcast, which is that, I'm going through a divorce. And, my ex gave me the approval to talk about it on the podcast the other day. She's like, I've been waiting for the episode to come out. And, I won't get into all the details. But like, that was like something that was really big for me. And I think a lot of that plus, the closing Go Fresh and like, it was like those two things kind of came together as like, I no longer have Go Fresh. I'm no longer married. Like, I need to backtrack. But I realized that like a lot of it was because my identities were wrapped around that. Like, I'm this entrepreneur husband that like puts my wife on. And then I'm this, I'm Billy Go Fresh. And it was really challenging because so much of my identity had become those two things. And when they both, within a matter of a month, had really just kind of gotten cleared off my plate, and I was like, who's Billy Anderson? Who's the Billy Anderson, right, as my Instagram name is. But it's like, who is that? And I think it's important that we don't lose sight of ourselves, that we have those things that we enjoy to do outside of work. And as I've invested more of my energy into finding out who I really am, or refinding myself, that my business has gotten better. And that I'm actually even more relatable. I'm more focused. I'm clear, because I'm not a 24/7 grind, business. Like, it's okay. Like my ex and I had a conversation the other day, and she was like, why are you home so early? And I was like, because she came over to grab something, and it was like 5:15, and she's like, you've never been home this early. And I was like, oh, actually every day I'm home between like 5 and 6. And she's like, what? I was like, don't get me wrong, like I still work, but like 5 and 6 I'm home because I got to take care of my dog. I take him for a walk. I get a gym workout in, and all these little things that I do for myself. The investment into myself has come back significantly into my business. And I think when I was sacrificing those for my business, and I think there are periods you need to sacrifice, but you cannot completely sacrifice those things, because otherwise your business ends up being sacrificed too. And like, you need your personal self to be able to keep your business going. So I love that you mentioned that. Sorry, I just went on my own little tangent, but I think that's really big, because we identify as an entrepreneur, but like, you're still Andy. Like, you are Andy that happens to be an entrepreneur. Going back to that content and what you do, it's like, you are Andy, but you have a business, and like, you are an entrepreneur, but that's just your job title. That is not who you are. And I remember when I was talking to one of our landlords, he was 78, 79-year-old man, and he told me the story of his pastor asking him, like, are you Bud, the commercial real estate agent, or are you Bud Cornett? And he was like, fuck, I'm Bud, the real estate agent, and he's like, I'm 78, 79 years old, and I've lost myself in being this, to the point that I haven't taken a vacation in 20 plus years. I spend every weekend working on my property. Like, he's like, the one thing I can tell you, Billy, is don't be Bud the broker. Like, I lost all these years. And it was like, whoa, that's crazy. But that is the path that many people get on, because they want to show up as the successful entrepreneur. So they try to put on this show 24/7, but they actually lose themselves.
No, 100%. And I think it's like, the intentions, right, are like never like bad. It's like you want to be this thing, right? And obviously you see it on social, or just wherever, and even beforehand you would see it too. But I think social media just amplifies it. But you're like, I do want to be an entrepreneur. I want to be in shape. I want to do this, and this, right? And you start holding yourself to this crazy standard that's just not sustainable. And I think, but again, you start beating yourself up if you're not holding that standard, again, subconsciously, just because you want that thing, right? You're striving for it. And it doesn't mean that you can't still be that, but again, you still have to be you. Like you still, like, I love what you said about that older gentleman who said that, he was identifying with being a broker as opposed to like just him and who he was. But I think it's like, who we are as people it's everything. It's the business, it's the success, it's the bad, it's the ugly, like it's everything. That's who we are as humans. And sometimes it's also the anti-hustle person of you that everybody has. Sometimes you want to kick back, crack open a beer and just chill, and that's like, I think that fuels I always like saying, like, fueling your soul over like other aspects, right? And sometimes that fuels your soul so that you can crush it tomorrow, but it's like to do it like every single day, like, again, kind of holding yourself to this crazy standard of like work and like bettering yourself, which I think is great. I'm all for like bettering yourself, but again, just putting into perspective so that when you wake up at that age, again, you're everything of who you are instead of just identifying with this one. But again, it starts out like, not that it starts out, but it's good intentions. It's just like easy to get like, there's just, I think there's also a certain personality, right, that gets really focused on that, because you just want to continue getting better and better. Yeah. You're just like, fuck, I can do this, and this, or this person does that. Like, I can keep pushing. Yeah. And you feel like you can kind of hold your breath longer and keep pushing, But at some point, it's like to sustainably do it and enjoy the ride. I think it's like that counterbalance, right? And enjoying every aspect of you. And even with what you said about like with your divorce and things like that, like I think not enough people talk about that, because you start hearing at every age you have those things happen. And I've had more conversations recently, and I'm not going to say who these people were, but with people in their 50s, mid 50s, that are having huge identity crisis, right? And for me, like at 27, I'm like, dude, you have it all figured out, like based off like what I'm seeing, right? But they're having these massive like identity crises and like don't know if this is what they want in their life, and they're freaking 55, you know? And it's like, not that that's like old, but it's like you from my perspective, I always thought like, man, you already had figured out, you're in this transition, right? But again, it happens at every stage of life. And I think the more that people have conversations around every aspect, because that conversation does include career, right? Like, you know, I worked so hard for all these years. Was it worth it? And on my end, from the outside in, I'm like, you have a great house, great car, great family. Seems pretty worth it to me.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
But it doesn't, you know, we can't see what goes on inside people, right? To see like what is actually fulfilling them. But those conversations, I think if we have them more often, people can at least try to like problem solve or have more grace with themselves. Because again, we are the ups and the downs, not just the ups, you know?
Yeah, and I think it's very interesting that, like, I hate calling it midlife crisis, but that kind of midlife crisis, and it's something that it happens a lot with men, especially like I unfortunately have some friends growing up that their fathers committed suicide because like the kids left, then the wife and them are like, we may split, and then they're all of a sudden like, I was a father, I was a husband, and like it's gone, right? And I think that sometimes we just like lose sight of what actually fulfills us, like you were saying, you know. And I think it starts with self-awareness. And I think that's something that the last probably, honestly, during COVID was when I really started to be like, why do I feel this way? Why do I think this way? What is actually making me happy? And like the more you dig at that, you'll actually chase the fulfillment. And, you know, I work less hours now than I've ever have in the last 9 years. But yeah, I'm producing higher results. And what it really came down to was like, I actually took on busy work because like I wanted to, like the hustle porn mentality of like, oh, I'm grind. And like, if I wasn't posting at 7:00 at night that I'm still at work, like I felt guilty. Yeah. And like, if I post that I'm watching a television show, I feel super fucking guilty. Like I'm a lazy piece of crap. But the reality is that before I used to just do things so that I like seemed like I was busy. And now I'm like, I don't care if I seem like I'm busy. I'm going to do what I need to do to drive the results, move the needle forward. And when I'm done, I'm done. And it was really auditing what I spent my day on. And I think a lot of times, especially as entrepreneurs, we just do busy work. And we just like, and like, you know, you're done early and you're like, you ask your fiance, want to go get some dinner? Like it's okay to do that. Like you're done. Yeah. You don't need to go find something to do. You don't need to wash the windows, sweep, or like do the BS stuff because I think that's what we end up doing is like, I'm done. What do I need to do? And like we end up wasting a lot of our day just doing stuff to do it, but not doing it with intention. And then we end up losing ourselves in it. And I think the thing I've learned really, especially probably over the last 8 years, I'll just say is that things become addictive. And like, if you start just doing anything, that you'll continue to just do anything. And you'll end up becoming a slave in your business or losing yourself in your business because you're like, oh, I'm gonna do it for 90 days. Oh, let me push it for 6 months. Let me push it for 12 months. And eventually it just becomes a habitual habit for you and like, you're screwed. And you've just gone down this deep, dark hole. We see it with people that, during COVID that secluded themselves in their homes and they're not coming out now. And like I ran into a buddy last week that I hadn't seen since before COVID. And he was like, dude, I legitimately have not gone out to a bar, restaurant, anything since COVID. And he's like, I'll be honest, I feel kind of weird. Yeah. And he chose it because of work and he was doing some other stuff, but he was like, dude, I kind of feel like socially awkward. Yeah. And like that is a reality, right? And that's on the social side, but it becomes like anything that you don't do or you do can become a habit. And so it's easy to lose ourselves. And I think it's a side of entrepreneurship that is often not talked about. Yeah. And I think it's something that's super valuable. And it's all the mental health stuff. And I think it's funny when I look through what we've talked about today is, yes, we gave action steps. Yeah. But let's be honest, a lot of it is more action steps in the mind and like how to think, how to reframe things. And I'm not saying anything about us. We shouldn't push. We shouldn't work hard. But like, you also need to reward yourself. Like I used to feel so damn guilty going on vacations. Yeah. And it's like, dude, like, but you come back so much better afterwards, And
it's like, that's what you're going to remember, when you're old, right? Yeah. And when you're, hopefully don't pass too early or whenever that time comes, right? Yeah. That's what's going to stick with you. And I think too, is like, you have to like, I think it just depends on upbringing, right? Cause I feel like I'm the same way. Like, it's almost like, you hit a big achievement, but then it's like, what's next, right? Instead of like, dude, like that's awesome that you hit that achievement. It's okay to go enjoy yourself. Like the work is always going to be there. There's, we're in capitalism. There's always going to be something for people to do, And so it's like, that's always going to be there. The trips and the time, like that's what's fleeting. And so it's like, just being okay with that and rewarding yourself and enjoying that ride. And again, it's like, I think just really like, just enjoying it and not feeling guilty about it and knowing that like everybody operates differently.
Yeah, and that's super important, man. I love all that. We got to enjoy the grind. I think entrepreneurship is a beautiful vehicle, but it can also become a vehicle that you kind of die in, and like it can take you wherever you want if you treat it the right way. But like you got to make sure you take care of yourself. Like at the end of the day, entrepreneur, if you think you are the thing that pushes it forward, then you have to take care of yourself first. Because if you abandon yourself, the business is going to fall apart. And I could speak 100% to experience in that, and like we have to prioritize ourselves and whatever that is for fulfillment and being able to be grateful for what we have and being able to celebrate the wins, right? Because there are a lot of wins that just get ignored, and the smallest of wins, like you helped a client do well, or one of your employees is killing it, like those are little wins, man. Like those are little wins, but we've got to acknowledge them. So. Well, man, this is another great episode. I love that we got to dive into a lot of the small business side, and I think it's super relevant for you because you are in this phase of just transitioning into becoming an entrepreneur. Well, I mean, I think I've always looked at you as an entrepreneur, but like truly going all in on yourself. And I think you gave us a lot of great perspective, and I think we covered a lot of like mindset things. But before we wrap, I always like to promote the people that are on our podcast. So first and foremost, let's get into like a little bit about exactly what you guys do. Just before we wrap, I want people to know how they can potentially work with you. So share a little about what you guys do and how you help businesses.
So we focus on digital marketing solutions for local businesses, specifically with paid social, organic social, and content creation specific to Instagram Reels and TikTok. We do offer other services, but those are kind of our main pillars where we really help clients.
Cool. And how do they find Vamp as well as how they find you?
So for our website, go to www.vampmediagroup.com. And then my Instagram handle is the Andres Mendez on Instagram and TikTok.
Perfect. Well, man, I really appreciate you coming on again. Love to have you back. Let's just keep on rolling it. Episode 3 will be even better. But man, just congratulations on everything, man. I'm super happy for you. It was an exciting text message to receive when you told me you went all in. I felt like it's always was the inevitable thing that was going to happen for you. It was just making that decision. And it's cool to have known you before and now to see you doing it. And I love the content you're putting out. You got to make sure you follow Andy because he is putting out great content, valuable content for local businesses as well as businesses not in the local area. So appreciate you, man. I respect you, and I'm super excited to see you continue to grow in your career.
Awesome. Thank you for having me. Yeah.
Absolutely. So if you guys got anything from this, which I know you did because Andy was dropping bombs, make sure you share this with your friends. Make sure you subscribe to your YouTube channel. Also rate and review us on our podcast. We don't sell anything on here. I guess I kind of sold Andy's services there a little bit, but we don't sell anything. We want you guys to be able to give us your honest feedback so we can continue to rank higher and get more people watching our podcast and learning the value that Andy and many of our other guests are dropping. So with that, we'll see you guys back here for our next episode of the Level Up Your Life podcast.